Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alastair.
And this fortnight we're going deep inside national defence on both sides of the Atlantic with the new Netflix movie A House of Dynamite and the 5th season of crappy espionage drama, but not crappy in a crappy way, Slow Horses. But first, Alastair, what else have you consumed in the last fortnight?
Well, stepping away from the spy world, I've been enjoying some gothic fiction. I've been watching the second season of Wednesday on Netflix, following up from the very successful first season that was a few years ago, because it takes Netflix a while to make these things. This is an adaptation of the beloved character from the Addams Family, starring Jenna Ortega and directed and executive produced by Tim Burton. Yeah, and it's basically got a really good gothic style to this. This is what I really like. Very appropriate for Halloween, which was this weekend while we record. Although I love gothic stuff and things like that, I do sometimes find Tim Burton a bit take it or leave it. He was massively hyped around the time I went to uni, in a sort of can do no wrong kind of way. But there are some of his films I thought are really, really good. Especially Sleepy Hollow is generally really sort of creepy, effective, gothic horror movie. But yeah, this is a bit less serious. I think it's billed as a comedy, even though it's got a sort of mystery plot to it as well. But Tim Burton's style does kind of really work with the sort of over-the-top gothiness combined with sort of the Addams Family aesthetic and the sort of setting of a school for outcasts, people with strange abilities or don't quite fit in, and there's usually a murder mystery each year that Wednesday's trying to solve. Yeah, the character's got some sort of gloomy magnetism, so yeah, overall it's a good fun show.
Yeah, we tried this in my house. My partner does quite enjoy both YA dramas and this sort of vaguely silly goth thing, but I didn't go for it for some reason. My partner especially decided she was bored of it after about 3 episodes, and I can't say I was hooked enough to carry on watching it without her. This one didn't work for us, I guess. It just seemed a bit Netflixy, to be honest, a bit wandering and plotless. Though again, I'm talking technically about the first season and not the second one, but Alastair is.
Yeah. I mean, it's got definitely that sort of YA element to it as well, which, is part of the appeal. Obviously, the school setting and things like that. And there's lots of teen romance plots. Yeah, which, is kind of part of the appeal. It's got that very classic, YA feel to it as well. And a mystery to resolve. Yeah, I find the sort of, the mystery sort of strangely compelling. It does unfold quite slowly, but there's always some interesting twists and turns along the way. They get some really good cast of supporting characters to be in it. Yeah, obviously Catherine Zeta-Jones playing the mother. This season they've got Steve Buscemi in it, who's obviously always good being kind of creepy and a bit weird. Billy Piper turns up as a music teacher.
I know they have a strong eye for big name cast in this, the classic Netflix thing, but if your show doesn't massively succeed, then they'll cancel you after 30 seconds. But if you're one of the lucky few shows that does really succeed, then they'll throw everything behind you.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess this is one of the high budget things that Netflix is really pouring money into. Yeah, I guess because they've got big names like Tim Burton stuff attached, things like that. Yeah, and a sort of well-known property like the Addams Family. Yeah, it seems to be one of the things they're really pushing. But yeah, I mean, it seems to be well received. I gather they're doing a third series at some point before 2030. But yeah, this second series is good. Interesting, there's kind of a bit more of a focus on the other members of the Addams Family. The first season was, very much focused on Wednesday going to a new school and leaving her family behind for a bit. But yeah, in this one, they've kind of weaved in the other characters more. There's, Morticia being on the fundraising committee for the school that's led by Steve Buscemi character. Her brother is now at the school as well, and there's a quite silly, quite grotesque plotline of him digging up this corpse and reanimating it and then having to hide this flesh-hungry zombie from everyone else, which is quite funny. So yeah, they kind of broadened it out in this season. I see the appeal in the first season. You're supposed to focus mainly on your core main character, making it a bit broader, adding more characters in the second season, but it keeps it interesting.
Morticia's brother, is that Uncle Fester?
No, sorry, I think I might have gone through things quite quickly. I meant Wednesday's brother is now...
okay.
Yeah, the school. But however, Uncle Fester is a recurring character who crops up in both the first season and the second season. Yeah, I can't remember who it is playing Uncle Fester, but he is very good at just doing absolute manic insanity and sort of weirdness. Yeah, so it's definitely a big comedy crazy character whenever Uncle Fester turns up.
Well, yeah, I guess inevitably the longer this goes, the more they're going to have time to do the old Addams Family fan service. Has Cousin It turned up yet?
Not yet. One of the main characters obviously is Thing, Wednesday's companion and stuff, which obviously helps with mystery plots if you've got someone small who can sneak into things and stuff or steal things. But there's quite a funny running plot line with Wednesday's roommate who's a werewolf, played by Emma Myers, who's a very good young actor. And it's interesting that, obviously the Enid character, the roommate, is the polar opposite in personality of Wednesday. She's all like pink and bright, and Wednesday's obviously dark. But there's a sort of running plot line when like Enid gets on better with Thing than Wednesday does and actually looks after Thing, which is just, again, one of the sort of interesting, like, silly dynamics they've got.
Having watched Wicked recently, as I discussed last episode, that suddenly sounds a lot like Wicked, but...
Yeah.
I guess, it's a classic for a reason.
Well, I mean, it's the apartment, isn't it? Or like, probably...
It's the two roommates at uni/college/school, the sort of pink sparkly one and the dark gothy one.
Yeah, the sort of, the odd couple, the mismatched people, I mean, it's obviously, it's the classic thing, like, the writing of this is quite good, in fact, especially for Wednesday's lines that are always, like, sort of dripping with sarcasm and sort of, like, morbid gloom and things like that, and, very focused on the fact that she despises everything, finds everyone contemptuous, and is gloomy all the time. And then, obviously, the obvious thing is like, well, who would the roommate be? Well, the exact opposite, obviously. Someone who, with like fluffy toys and lots of pink and things like that. Although the Enid character is more than just the comedy foil for Wednesday. There's a good plotline in the first season about her being unable to turn into a werewolf, with some sort of nods towards conversion camps that they have in America for teenagers, with her werewolf family being unhappy with her. And there's a plotline in the second season of her getting, into a wolf pack, and you've got the classic, they were friends in the first season, now they're going in their different ways as they mature. It's kind of YA stuff, but it's kind of good how they sort of weave it around that sort of like fantasy world they've built up with the different kind of creatures, from like, there's like sirens and hydras and werewolves and things like that at the school. So I know there's a sort of like gothic-y world to this that's quite appealing.
No, I think that's what I vaguely remember from the bit I watched, that they did at least realise the silly Tim Burton-y goth thing quite well. Even if, as you say, that's an aesthetic that a lot of people seem to get tired of. If you're going to do it, I guess the Addams Family is the place to do it. And I'm very much in the minority here. Clearly, this is, as I said, one of Netflix's big success stories. It's Stranger Things and then this.
Yeah, exactly. It's certainly got a lot of eyeballs on it. I mean, it's not like probably one of the best things on Netflix, but I do think, I just wanted to discuss on the podcast, and I do think it's a good show. I especially find the aesthetic appealing. They seem to have spent quite a decent amount of money on like production design, costume, things like that. And what can't be overstated is how good Jenna Ortega is in the role. I mean, she's just obviously, I don't know, she's just got this kind of gothic presence. So everything from like her look to her sort of general aesthetic to her ability to do sarcasm and withering and things like that. So even though they are broadening out the season more to focus on some of the other members of the Addams family, this is very much the Jenna Ortega show, and she is really, really good. So she's, I think, worth the price of admission alone, as they say.
No, I know this is very much what I believe they call a star-making turn.
Anyway, I've been catching up with some Gothic TV for Halloween on Netflix. Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Right, well, I have been watching something else that has been very popular in its area, something that has been taking the country by storm. Those of you who followed these reviews for a while may be able to guess what I'm talking about. It is, of course, the Celebrity Traitors on BBC One, the celebrity version of the reality TV show in which a bunch of people gather in a majestic Scottish castle to play a really elaborate game of werewolves. Or basically, they're divided into the traitors and the faithful have to try and work out who the traitors are, while the traitors can kill off a different one of them every night. And this has been, as I said when I covered this before, this is surprisingly fun. It is one of the few reality TV/game shows I have actually enjoyed. Well, that and Taskmaster, which I watch at the gym while I work out. And I think, if anything, what this has in common with Taskmaster, and what in fact has stayed the same between the original version and the celebrity version, and it's one reason why the celebrity version actually works and has been good, is that, the focus is very much on the game. It is broadly kind of a reality show in that it has these real-life contestants in it, I guess, or at least, the regular version does. But it's not pretending that this is the melodramatic story of their lives. It's not spinning some elaborate fiction about them. It's just, them playing a game. And it mostly holds back from doing too much overly prurient stuff about their personal lives. It's just about the game and their strategies for the game. And because of that, it actually translates quite well to celebrities. It's the same. It's just some people playing a game. It's just that they are people you in some cases recognise. I'm about 50% on recognising the celebrities in this, I think. There's lots of people I've vaguely heard of, a few people I actually have known of for a while. They've got Stephen Fry and Jonathan Ross in this, as British TV celebrities go. That's fairly impressive, I suppose. I
was going to say, they have actually got proper celebrities for this. I mean, it's like Tom Daley, who's the Olympic diver. There's Alan Carr, who's a comedian I've seen on TV. So actual people like I've heard of.
The pop star Paloma Faith was in it. quite briefly, but still.
Didn't she get killed right at the beginning or something?
Yes. I think she may have made it to the second episode, just about. So yeah, no, it turns out, because they've always been fairly strict about focusing on the game rather than the people, it kind of still works. They're still doing that. It is. I think there's definitely a sense that you're watching people who are a bit more used to being on TV, a bit more aware that they're being filmed, and therefore, they're not letting themselves let go and risk embarrassing themselves like the regular people sometimes do. It does seem, even more than regular traitors, like you're watching a group of friends or acquaintances play a parlour game. That element, if anything, turned up a bit by the fact it's celebrities. But yeah, because it's always been fairly focused on that, it's still quite fun and quite watchable. The celebs, although they're not, letting us see their deep inner feelings, they are, getting into the game and getting a bit competitive. It's fun, I've been exposed to some people I haven't heard of before, and some of them are quite entertaining. Turns out the rugby player Joe Marler has a surprisingly good line in Dry Wit. Who knew?
Oh, fair enough. I've not heard of Joe Marler, but I don't think I can name
Me neither.
I don't know if I can name any professional rugby player since Johnny Wilkinson retired about 20 years ago or something. but yeah, I mean, it sounds like this is actually working with the celebrity version because, I'm not a big connoisseur, shall we say, of reality TV, these things, but I always kind of feel with a lot of stuff, like when they put in the celebrity version, it's just a sort of bid for attention, like Celebrity Big Brother or things like that. It's just kind of aimed more at just getting the attention of people who are obsessed with celebrity culture. But yeah, this sounds like the fact that, like, it's clearly a game and there's like a performative element to it, actually getting in people who are used to like being on camera and being in the public eye actually kind of works.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fun. Alan Carr is very entertaining, it turns out. I'm not super familiar with his work. I think I've accidentally watched his show a couple of times whilst channel surfing at my parents' house or something, but I'm not super familiar. He's very entertaining in this.
Yeah, I've definitely seen him do comedy on like those live at the Apollo style variety shows that, are always on Dave and things like that. Back when we were a student, used to just spend ages just like sticking Dave on and watching whatever comedy was on. And I remember him from those days. He's been around for a while. He's been famous for quite a while.
Yeah. He's good in this. I understand why people might like him. Celia Imrie, the actress, is incredibly fun in this. She's just swanning around the place, telling everyone how much she loves them and then betraying them at the round table. It's a great time.
That sounds good.
And also, the viral moments of the season so far probably is when Celia Imrie farts in the middle of one of the tasks. And they left that in. I think I read in Pop Bitch, but she was very, very insistent that it be left in.
All right, fair enough.
So yeah, fair enough. She seems like a good sport. That's fun. Very much giving nice posh lady.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. It sounds like people got a sense of humour about themselves. I mean, I guess it's all curated and artificial, but I suppose that makes for like enjoyable, entertaining TV.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe in the future the stories will start to leak out about the raging egos behind the scenes at Celebrity Traitors, but at least from the front end, it seems very genial. As I say, it just seems like a group of people playing a game, and they're sort of getting into it and wanting to win, but it's not getting acrimonious. Well, again, if it is, they're cutting those bits out.
Yeah, and it's still Claudia Winkleman hosting.
Yep, still there. Very much a key part of the franchise at this point. Again, she's doing the sort of goth melodrama thing where she hands around wearing dramatic black outfits and staring out from under her fringe. And again, the tone they've gone for with it, this sort of knowingly silly comedy folk horror thing where they're like alone in the forest and people in cloaks emerge and stuff. It's quite fun. It makes it seem like a bit heightened, a bit silly, a bit dramatic, a bit, again, more than just a reality show about our grubby lives. And so yeah, again, that's The Traitors. It's just fun to watch. It's a good TV show.
Yeah, it sounds like it's got this element of you're not supposed to take it like super seriously or things like that, or appreciate the kind of the silliness of it.
Well, yeah, which I think is again why I'm able to enjoy this, whereas I'm not generally a big reality TV kind of guy.
Next up, this episode, we will be discussing A House of Dynamite, new film from Catherine Bigelow that's part of Netflix's series of visionary directors bringing films to Netflix this winter. This film stars Rebecca Ferguson as a White House security analyst who witnesses the launch of a missile from somewhere in the North Pacific, possibly by China, possibly by North Korea, possibly by Russia. It then charts the time of the missile's flight towards the continental United States and the various institutions and security procedures that respond to it. If that sounds kind of dull and bureaucratic, it's not, because it is a nuclear missile hurtling towards the United States. How will America respond? What will happen? We've seen this film on Netflix. Nick, what did you think of it?
I thought this was a very nicely made, well-acted, atmospheric film, which kind of ended up being less than the sum of its parts for me. Like, by about halfway through, I kind of felt like I'd seen all the moves, even though everyone was doing very good work, and there were lots of good, meaningful shots. I did get to a certain point of, yep, okay, I get it, I see what you're doing here, and it didn't really do that much else. Even though it did cleverly end on, because this film, I don't know what constitutes a spoiler, we maybe won't describe the ending yet, but this film is divided into 3 chunks, 3 quite discrete chunks, telling the story of the same 18-minute period-ish, during which the missile is launched, detected, and hurtles towards the United States from different perspectives, as Alastair said, different institutions. That is what this film does. There's one chunk, and then it rewinds, does another chunk, and then it does it again. And yes, it's very ambitious. It's one of these times where, yes, you've attempted something interesting and smart, and it's a shame that the resulting film, I thought, was just okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. Sort of aligns one of the things I was going to say. Well, there's 2 things I kind of want to highlight with this film. First is I thought it was genuinely tense when I watched it. I don't know, it's partly because I've seen lots of political military thrillers and know something about nuclear weapons and stuff that the central conceit of a nuclear missile hurtling towards America is quite tense in itself. The other thing I'd say about the film is that it's possibly one of those films that's maybe more interesting to discuss than maybe to watch itself, because there's a lot going on there, but it's one of those things that's interesting to unpack. Some of it which I only really appreciated by reading about the film afterwards. So for example, Nick mentioned the structure of these 3 stories. One thing that I realised looking at the film afterwards is that the structure is basically what it charts is rising through levels of power in the American institutions. So the first bit is basically radar operators who detect the initial missile launch, and then how that gets passed up to the next level, which is the Rebecca Ferguson sort of White House security level, and then it kind of goes up and up and up. And each time they go round, you basically get a higher, more powerful institution. And then the final of the 3 stories focuses on the president, the most powerful person, and the person who ultimately has to decide what they have to do. And that's a very interesting structure. I didn't really actually pick that up from watching it. When I was watching, I was just like, oh, this is an interesting movie when you see the same events from different perspectives. I didn't get this whole thing of, which makes sense when you look into later. They're like, oh, it's rising power is what it's doing. How do we respond at different levels? Which is an interesting thing, but it's something you get from reading about the film rather than watching it.
I didn't explicitly get that, but I understand that's what they were doing, because you do see some of the same conversations from different perspectives, or you see the effects these orders have when they filter down, and then, in the next section you see the process that led to those orders. So it is sort of slowly unpacking things and slowly revealing exactly what's going on, which again, as an idea, is quite clever.
Yeah. It is tense in that regards as well. Obviously there's the whole thing handing over them, which is this could be the beginning of the end of the world, a nuclear missile strike resulting in a nuclear response and then a similar nuclear response.
Yeah, and the thing that's done well in this film, I think, because, I don't want to be too mean about it, too dismissive, is just the obvious understanding that everyone has that, this is a nuclear weapon, this could easily be the end of the world, It's never, I think, really fully explicitly stated. No one at any point yells that at the camera during a moment of breakdown. It's not that kind of melodramatic film. But the way the tone of all the individual sections shifts as and when that dawns on the individual characters, you can really see that in their performances, and it's quite well done.
Yeah, exactly, And I guess it's playing on the fact that the audience of this film is, at least tangentially aware that once a nuclear war begins, that's game over, or at least, a full-out nuclear war, they don't need to state it. But also there's the kind of real pressure that they've got a limited amount of time to make the right decision, and everything rests on it. So that's kind of very much the source of tension in the film.
Yeah, and it was an interesting film to watch, having read, as I mentioned recently on this podcast, the book Nuclear War, A Scenario by Annie Jacobson, which describes a lot of what happens in this film, to be honest. I don't know if the people who made this film had read that book, but it lines up, it vibes. And that book certainly gives you a lot more of the red meat, in that book really goes into a lot more of the detail up to and including the impact, and includes some slightly more, as I said at the time, blatant thriller pacing to try and entice you in. Whereas this film, weirdly actually, considering this is, the visual version, and you'd think they would want to, score some easy points by including some action sequences or something, holds back on the thriller business and does just give you people talking.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if they'd read, as part of the research for this nuclear war scenario, as this is clearly very detailed research and for a lot of evidence, has gone into it. Also, I'm very familiar with the sort of thing from, again, reading 1983, The World on the Brink, about a similar time when America and Russia came close to nuclear war. In fact, one of the instances described in that book is nodded to in the film when Russia nearly launched a nuclear strike at America when a radar operator misidentified a weather satellite as a nuclear missile. So these things, they're sort of floating around in the consciousness. And it is a very detailed, well-researched, clearly, at least believably realistic film. I mean, that's very much the sort of Catherine Bigelow aesthetic. She does these military spy thrillers which, with emphasis on the believability, the reality. I'm thinking of films like Zero Dark 30. Yeah, it's obviously, very good, at least very believable, if not realistic. I really like The Hurt Locker, which is, again, sort of a quite detailed study of bomb disposal soldiers. That one's, possibly a bit more psychological, a bit more emotional than this one, which is like positioned more as a straight up thriller. But she is like a really, really good director and is really doing excellent work here. She's the first woman to win the Best Director Oscar and one of only 2 women to ever win it. So, the other being Chloe Zhao for Nomadland. And I think what you're getting here is, and what sort of the film sort of sold at, is a sort of classic slice of Catherine Bigelow, detailed, well-researched, like accurate, tense, like military thriller.
Yeah, and if anything, the realism and the relatively low-key nature of the storytelling does actually in some ways make it more harrowing when you have these moments where people realise what's happening. There's one storyline with the defence secretary, which teeters on the edge of being melodrama, but it's very, very, very downplayed. I think they get away with it.
Well, without spoiling it, because it's one of the things that is good, actually going to the film like unspoiled. That is a really tense and really shocking scene. And there are some good moments, I think, in the film, because obviously this film is about very professional, top-level government, military, spy people, all of them doing their absolute best under enormous pressure of the potential end of the world. But there's a couple of moments when a few people crack and accidentally, not accidentally, so they sort of do what they're not supposed to do and call their loved ones and say, just get out, And this moment of believe me, something terrible is about to happen. And those moments kind of make you go oof, that kind of really adds to the emotional weight of the film.
Yeah, and also the tone of the administration they're depicting here is probably a little bit closer to an idealised West Wing. It's not quite the idealised West Wing, but it's a lot more what you'd ideally hope the US government would be than what you suspect it currently is. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how many of the roles are political roles versus the state security apparatus that kind of stays imposed between regimes. But I mean,
assume the president and the Secretary of Defence, obviously.
Yeah,
the main ones.
Yeah, and I mean, they're definitely not doing a Trump for the president. I mean, I don't know how Trump would react in circumstances of a nuclear missile heading to America. Horrifying, I'm sure would be the answer.
Well, I mean, the president, as played by Idris Elba, does a lot of soul-searching about, how he should respond to this. Well, the soul-searching he has time for in 18 minutes.
Yeah.
And, yes, one suspects the current president might not, but who can say?
Who can say? Hopefully we never find out. But
yeah.
It's sort of borderline a spoiler, but not really, I suppose. But I did like the reveal of the president's played by Idris Elba. It's quite interesting. The way they marketed the film is that he's not mentioned in the marketing really at all. And considering he's the first name in the credits that come at the end, because I guess he's probably the most famous person in the film, it's very much sold as Catherine Bigelow thriller starring Rebecca Ferguson. And then in the first 2 stories, because the president, you don't see the president, you just hear his voice or the orders filtering down because you're lower down the institutions. And then it's when you get to the third of the 3 cycles, the one focused on the president himself, you go oh, Idris Elba. And it's quite good because I watched this on its day of Netflix release, so before Film Twitter, or Film Blue Sky I suppose it is now, had thoroughly spoiled that twist. And I thought that was quite good to be oh wow, Idris Elba's the president. And I thought, oh, that's some great casting and a good surprise. So and he is good in the role again. I could believe Idris Elba as the president, a man with a lot of charisma, but also intensity and a seriousness that you probably would want in those moments. I mean, maybe closer to a sort of Obama administration meets the West Wing, but, it's good in the context of fiction.
I have been, I guess, spoilt, if spoilt is the word, for the fact that Elba was playing the president. But no, he is good at the part. He does, as I say, have the sort of intensity you want if you're doing this and taking it seriously.
Yeah. No, the whole cast is really strong. Jared Harris as the Secretary of Defense. Yeah, I always enjoyed him in everything from Chernobyl to Mad Men. Yeah, and I do also want to say that, the sort of nominal star of the film, the sort of first major character to appear, Rebecca Ferguson, she's really, really good. I mean, she does intense seriousness. Yeah, I thought she was sort of excellent as the main character of the first cycle, kind of who makes the sort of the initial important decisions. The sort of person who's very, very calm under pressure, but is kind of dealing with the most high pressure circumstances you can possibly think of.
Well, I mean, they're starting at the sort of, somewhat relatable level. I mean, clearly, Rebecca Ferguson's character in this film has a much more powerful and high pressure job than I could ever dream of, but she is, in this film, probably the sort of audience identification figure to take you into it a little bit. Yeah,
I mean, it starts with her doing the kind of classic, it's a day at the office. Her son's unwell, she has to, sort out some medicine for him, get in, the car and, go to the office and then, say hi to her colleagues and get her breakfast at the canteen. So, which is the interesting kind of pacing. It's building up. It's kind of starting with a sort of normality. And okay, something's going to happen sort of moment. But yeah, again, that's the relatable main character before then, yeah, we get into the core drama.
But again, that's one of the key beats throughout the film, as I sort of mentioned earlier, when character after character goes from this is a normal day to oh shit. And again, it's very rarely played as this like huge soul-crushing moment. It's just this thing they sort of realise in this single crushing instant. And yeah, it's a good beat. And yeah, there's lots of individual good bits in this film. It has a very good atmosphere throughout. I just felt like it didn't really ultimately go anywhere. But could I spoil the ending? Can we do some spoiler space now while I spoil the ending for 10 seconds?
Yeah, I've got thoughts on the ending, so I was thinking it'd be good to drop a spoiler wall for the one sort of big element that we are not discussing. So yeah, spoilers, run now if, jump to the next bit. But yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the last few minutes of House of Dynamite. Basically, the film just closes out when Idris Elba, the president, decides he's going to strike back in the last few minutes. The last minute or so before the bomb hits Chicago. And that's it. You don't see the bomb hit. You don't see the outcome. You don't see what happens as a result. And I have seen some quite aggressive, was that it? Backlash on the internet to this. I didn't mind it. I don't think it was ever that kind of movie, as you said. I don't think Catherine Bigelow's massively interested in disaster porn in this film. But I did have a certain sense of, I don't know. I don't entirely disagree with the was that it sentiment, if only because I felt like the film didn't really get me anywhere beyond nuclear bombs are bad. If someone shot a nuclear bomb at America, it would be tense and scary. And I sort of got that by the halfway point, and I didn't really feel like it got me a huge amount further.
It's an interesting point. Again, it's one of those things that's probably more interesting to unpack than watch, because I suppose I can see why people feel it's unsatisfactory, because you see the cycle 3 times and you never get past the point. You never find out who launched the missile. You never find out if it's a mistake or if it's the beginning of an all-out nuclear war. You never find out if it was possibly a dud, or does the weapon malfunction, or does it actually explode and wipe out, I think, Chicago that's heading to, with an estimated casualty of between 9 and 10 million people initially, and then who knows what after that. These big things are kind of left ambiguous for you to decide, and I feel that some people would be very much like, I want to see what happens next. Like they've been, proffered some like exciting food or whatever and then had it taken away from them in terms of storytelling. I thought it's interesting. Well, certainly interesting. I like the approach of this, making an interesting decision. I feel the film's focus is very much on the process of what happens when the missile launches, and that's sort of well documented and something you can explore. And Catherine Bigelow is very focused on what would happen and what's documented and things like that. And because we've never, fortunately, had a nuclear missile just launched like this, we don't know what would happen afterwards. So it would stray more away from the type of fiction, or into a deeper type of fiction that I don't think Catherine Bigelow is interested in exploring. It's that's the kind of point of the film, but I understand that that's more interesting to talk about and to read about than maybe to actually watch.
Yeah, I don't know. I think mostly it's just because of the slow, thoughtful nature of the film. It doesn't really rise to anything. I understand you could infer that the president makes this decision that they're going to strike back. They're going to preemptively launch their own missiles before this one even hits. And you can therefore potentially just infer from that that's it. Someone launches at America, America launches at everyone else launches back at everyone else. Nuclear war, end of world.
Yeah.
You probably could quite easily infer that is basically what is going to happen. And to be fair, if I were Catherine Bigelow and I'd made this film, I don't know how I would show that any better at the end of the film without going into something ludicrous.
Yeah, or just do the Dr Strangelove ending. I guess spoilers for Dr Strangelove, a film from the 60s. But when it just the credits just play out to a sort of montage of nuclear annihilation, because there's literally no story after that. But yeah, I guess it's it's not the story she wants to tell. What happens after the bomb drops. It's kind of what's the process of the bomb dropping, which is a different take from, I don't know, something like Threads or something like that, which is more focused on the broader story of nuclear war. This is more focused on the specific instances of what would happen.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this film, again, I'd recommend reading Nuclear War, a scenario which takes a similar sort of premise and runs with it even further and into even more detail.
Yeah, no, I definitely do want to read that book. It definitely sounds like my sort of thing, as you recommended before on the podcast. And this film does have, I think, an anti-nuclear message to it, and some level, the degree that we could just destroy the world quite easily. So maybe it's better that we don't have nuclear weapons. On some level, I feel the ambiguity ending, on some level, reinforces that message. There's this element of not knowing either way. If it gave you clear answers, this was launched by North Korea or something like that, or China, then it would be too easy to reduce the film to it's bad that North Korea has nuclear weapons. These nutters could just fire one off at us at any moment. But the ambiguity and the focus on the process, I think, reinforces this idea of that these processes, these weapons are just too dangerous for anyone to have. We should just get rid of them happen because this is what could happen and it would just be obliteration. So I feel that's kind of the message. But I thought that worked, but again, more interesting to discuss than maybe to watch.
Yeah, it's an interesting film. I don't know if I'd quite say interesting failure, but it's possibly in some level more interesting than it is entertaining.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think interesting failure. I think, it's good, not a failure. But like I say, I mean, maybe someone who has my intellectual hat on, again, more interesting to think about and read about. That's what I took away the most from this film. Finally, this episode we will be discussing Slow Horses Season 5, the popular British spy drama that is a bit scuzzier, shall we say, than the very slick American spy drama that we just talked about. In this season, the Slow Horses are packing up their Slough house before being shipped out somewhere else. However, there is also a destabilisation strategy from an unknown group of terrorists going on in London, targeting the security services. This is also during the backdrop of the London mayoral election, when a beloved mayor from an ethnic minority background is facing off against an insurgent right-wing populist. This is the well-known show on Apple Plus, starring Gary Oldman and Jack Lowden. It's been very successful, probably one of the most successful things that Apple have put out. We've just watched this 5th season recently, and Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, often we review this show and end up saying, yes, the good show is once again good, and there's an element of that here. The characters and the styling are as reliably good as ever. I'm still yanked along by the tight thriller pacing and enjoying the slightly wry, cynical, vaguely thick-of-it-esque wisecracks and general worldview. However, I will say I don't think this is quite as seamlessly great as Slow Horses has been in the past. I feel like the plot felt a bit awkward in places. Mostly I feel like they finally tripped over the obvious awkward point I think I've pointed out before, and other reviewers have too, which is that this is meant to be about the rejects losers of MI5, yet they always seem to be at the forefront of major incidents. Whereas this time I think the show struggles a bit with that awkwardness, and we end up getting consistently long stretches in the middle of the season where the alleged main characters don't actually do that much, and it feels like we are actually watching a still quite well made show about the sort of front desk big shots who normally get relegated to second place, and then it has to sort of occasionally awkwardly yank the focus back to the Slow Horses. But yeah, it's still entertaining, it's still got a good tone which I just enjoy spending time with, so I'm probably not going to bitch that much, but I do think this was a season that didn't feel quite as perfectly formed as some of the past ones have.
Interesting, because I enjoyed this one a lot. I think I enjoyed it more than you did by the sound of it. Yeah, as you say, it's usually tense and dramatic, and it's still tense and dramatic here. I kind of liked the progression of the thriller plot, this kind of destabilization strategy with a different escalating element being deployed in kind of each episode. I felt ramped up the tension that I was particularly into, and there was some good twists along the way that I didn't see coming as well that kept me excited. Yeah, the one thing about this season actually is that I've kind of felt they didn't have much for the Jack Lowden character to do. He was just sort of in the background a bit more, and occasionally just investigating things that Lamb had sent him to look into. The last season focused a lot on him and his relationship with his father and his grandfather, and it seemed like this one is he's kind of on the back foot a bit. But we did get a lot of great Lamb moments of him being awful and occasionally a competent spy. And they also allowed some of the other characters to come to the fore a bit. There's some good Roddy Ho stuff in this season, which we can discuss in a bit.
Yeah, the characters are still there. Jackson Lamb's endearing, knowing, clever awfulness is still reliably there. And Roddy Ho, I do appreciate that they're now 5 years in and they still stubbornly refuse to make Roddy Ho even somewhat redeemable. A lot of other shows would have started to soften his rough edges and get into sort of, why is he like that? Maybe we should feel bad for him by now. And although they sort of do vaguely hint at the slight patheticness beneath him, they stubbornly refuse to actually give him a softer side or a redemptive moment. He's a bit pathetic and a bit of a wanker about it, but he's not going to stop, it seems. And he still continues to turn up, be a prick, and have an increasingly worse haircut every year.
Yeah. He's a good character. He got more screen time in this season than previous seasons. And it has resulted in Christopher Chung, who plays Roddy Ho, who's really, really good. I've seen him in other things, playing different characters, and he does have a real range. But here he excels in this really scuzzy, awful computer guy they have. But there seems to definitely be a lot of focus on him. I've seen he's getting media attention. I think he got a profile in British Vogue or something similar. So there's a lot of focus on him as an actor, and he's a good performer. drama. And I did like in this season how they just really dug into the sort of bizarre fantasy world that Ronnie Ho lives in, where he's like the best and everyone like is in love with him and like worships him. Yeah, as the season progresses, you're expecting the moment for him to basically break down and realise, like, you know I'm a loser, it's just all bravado. But like, no, yeah, they never give him a redemptive moment, they never give him a moment of like reality. He just lives in this bizarre fantasy world where he's the king and everyone else is the loser. Yeah, it's one of the funny elements of the show. I mean, this show, as well as being a tense spy thriller, it does have a real sense of humour to it. And yeah, it looks like Ronnie Ho is still very much part of that.
Well, yeah, and, a lot of these sort of shows, and this show specifically, do pride themselves, I think, on being like, espionage. It's not like in the action films. It's actually a bit of a dirty drudge. But Ronnie Ho, even though he works in professional espionage, clearly does think he's in an action film and gets to deliver lines of dialogue, like, when he's in a holding cell and people are coming to interview him, he gets to say things like, "I knew you'd come crawling back." Like he's in, again, a middling thriller. While the other person, who's an actual serious professional, sort of stares at him going, "What are you doing? What are you talking about? Do you live in our world?" And yeah, it is very funny.
Yeah, those are some good bits, yeah. As well as, obviously, Lamb's, again, like, contempt for everyone and sort of awfulness and his, like, inability to do anything from, like, basic hygiene to, like, basic human decency, turning up on time. He's just a train wreck of a man in quite a funny way. And Gary Oldman, obviously, is great as, like, playing the character and in full scuzziness. This seems to be the word of the episode.
Yeah, Jackson Lamb's an interesting character because he, in some ways, is a slightly more straightforward, rough exterior, but, he kind of cares underneath. Type thing. You've seen that in a lot of TV shows, and that is kind of what's being done here, but they're always careful to really space out those moments where he cares. Again, in a lot of shows, by season 5, you'd have had quite a lot of these moments where he shows that he really cares, and by season 5, a lot of the rough exterior stuff would have just been sanded down to basically nothing, and he'd basically just be everyone's lovely dad, and they're very careful not to go to that extent.
Yeah, it's the Dr Cox Effect or something like that.
So it's very much the Dr Cox Effect, yes.
Yeah, when we reviewed the last season, one of the things I talked about is that like they've done this maneuver like a few times, which is that like Slough House, the slow horses, Jackson Lamb, ugly on the surface, but like actually good underneath and cares about his people and looks after them. Whereas the Park, the other people, the slick spies, are slick and professional and good looking on the surface, but they're conniving, backstabbing, traitorous. Well, not traitorous to their country, but like traitorous to each other, like throw people under the bus to save their career sort of people. So yeah, they've done it quite a few times. They're kind of ugly on the surface, nice underneath, nice on the surface, ugly underneath sort of thing. And I liked in this season that they didn't quite do that so much as a reveal. I felt it very much was stated like, look, the deal that like, Lamb does care about people, the Park are backstabbers. Lamb can be a halfway decent spy when he can be bothered to get off his arse. Like, the Park will go herring in to arrest someone who's slipping out the back window, but Lamb's the one who's just waiting there to donk the person with his car door to actually catch them. They've done that maneuver full times, but I feel this season was very much like, oh yeah, you get it now, so we're not doing it as a reveal, we're just like going with it. But still, Lamb is still like, again, gross and disgusting and an alcoholic and all the rest of it. But I did also really like this season, there's a great bit, I think it's just pretty much in the middle, when like Lamb does this like long monologue to distract some of the Park spies in a crucial tense scene, and it's a litany of like, a young spy who was horribly tortured by the Stasi, and it's really clear that like that happened to Lamb, even though later he like denies and says, I was just bollocks, I was just making it up to be a distraction. And Gary Oldman does, because he's such a good actor, when he does a big dramatic monologue, it's really like is moving and like intense and things like that, and it's one of the really like stirring emotional parts of this season. And even though you know that when he says, I was just bollocks, I was just making all that dark shit up, he was like, no, it's real. And the final shot of the season nods towards it being real, and although the other characters don't acknowledge it, it's there, and it's a great scene because it's Gary Oldman's acting as well as the writing.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've sort of hinted at things like Jackson Lamb's past throughout the show, and again, with impressive restraint, it's never quite brought to the fore in a really on-the-nose way, and I guess I'll be interested to see if the show will manage to finish before they bring it to the fore. I don't know, I think surely at this point they must be starting to catch up with Mick Herron's books.
Considering they're doing 2 seasons a year, they must be getting through the books relatively quickly. I think there are
I don't think that's the case anymore, is it? I mean, it's basically 1 season a year at this point. It must have been a year since we covered season 4. Surely time isn't passing that quickly.
I mean, time is just sort of like a soup at this point in my head. I have no idea, what day it is.
It's time for everyone's favourite part of every podcast. It's live Googling. Yes, season 4 was a year ago.
Okay, great. Okay, cool, interesting. But yeah, so they have slowed down a bit, and I think new Slow Horses novels have come out, I assume on some vaguely sensible attempt to capitalise on the popularity of the TV show. But yeah, there was a lot of material to get through here, but you got a pretty established world. They're definitely doing a sixth season, because you get a little preview at the end, which I quite liked.
Yeah, in a world of, as I always moan about, TV shows taking 2 to 3 years to come out, Slow Horses, like clockwork, at least till they run out of books.
Yeah, considering we're going to get about 3 seasons of Wednesday in about 8 years or something mad like that, I guess because they are properly famous people who are in it. So I'm glad that at least we're getting, in 2026, some more Slow Horses. And it'd be interesting to see where they take the next season. Diana Taverner, the Kirsten Scott Thomas character, is now in charge of the park. So yeah, that's the way they've changed things up.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed, getting a sort of climax to the storyline with James Callis's character. He, again, playing the sleazy guy. For fans of him in Battlestar as Gaius Baltar, he's back playing another sleazy guy.
Yeah. No, and he's very good as well, yeah. And I like the political element to this season as well. Yeah, one thing is obviously there's this race to the mayor with a right-wing populist who's kind of stirring up trouble because they've got a prominent man of colour, as the mayor, who's a Sadiq Khan-esque, lovable guy that everyone just sort of nice and relates to, who's very sort of modern London. It's diverse, it's inclusive, it's positive about things, versus this kind of, reactionary right-wing knee-jerker with his kind of tabloid hack of a wife who's just spills bile about immigrants and things like that. And
I did appreciate that they didn't just make the somewhat Sadiq Khan analogue of Saints, though. He's a bit, not exactly sleazy, but a bit...
He's a pole climber.
Cynical politician at times. When he goes to the memorial for the people at that mass shooting and launches into a speech about how London can be Lunderful again, it's absolutely cringeworthy. It's one of the closest things this show has gone to full thick of it. You don't think, wow, what an inspirational hero. You do think, oh god, man, come on.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that he's not just, a saint.
Yeah, I like that as well. And also, I feel I guess because it's Will Smith of the thick of it, he's obviously got his eye on the politics. I think on some level it's a sort of about Sadiq Khan, which is, I like Sadiq Khan and I've voted for him as mayor, but he's not a revolutionary, transformative figure. He's a great symbol of diversity and inclusion, but a kind of very liberal, even corporate version of diversity and inclusion. He's still very much a politician's politician, a pole climber, he's in it for his career, and there's the kind of the element as well, there's I don't know, not to get too into politics when we're here to discuss film, but there's a world of difference between, I don't know, Sadiq Khan and Jeremy Corbyn or the new Green leader. And I feel they're kind of reflecting that, because this isn't a show about politics, but like I say, it's Will Smith. Politics is clearly one of his passions, obviously from writing the thick of it and things like that. And there is some sort of it's more than just this guy's supposed to be Sadiq Khan and he's nice. It's more just there's a kind of commentary on modern politicians being manoeuvrers, greasy pole climbers, in it for themselves, sometimes horribly out of touch. Even the nice ones who you kind of like because the other one are just so awful.
Yeah, it's the thick of it-esque view this show has, which can at times be, a bit cynical. This is not, often a nice show about nice people. As I say, even Jackson Lamb, who is well-intentioned ultimately and ultimately cares, I think is a bit of a twat about it, and does sometimes just let people hang because they've made his life difficult.
There's cynicism to this show, which you get from the thick of it. Yeah, it's not, obviously, the thick of it is not The West Wing. It's cynical. But The West Wing is ultimately inspirational.
Yeah, and this show... Spooks, which is another show I've mentioned as, I've described this show as thick of it meets Spooks, which is, I guess, a fairly reductive description, but whatever. It is what it is.
It's also pretty on the nose.
And even Spooks had its sort of greater good moments where people had to sacrifice themselves or something. But this show, I think, doesn't really have so much of an eye on the greater good. There's a certain sense that, yes, you could sacrifice yourself for the security services, but they're pricks, and you may well find that there's not really any greater good to be served.
No, exactly. And Jackson Lamb is a kind of big portrait of that, a man who's just been chewed up by the system, which has turned him into this disgusting cynical alcoholic.
Yeah, and there are terrorists and stuff in the world who are worse pricks than the cynical assholes of the security services, which does mean that you can still make a show where these cynical assholes have to try and stop a terrorist attack, but the show is always very clear that doesn't make large chunks of the security services not pricks.
No, exactly, yeah, they just don't want to shoot up a whole church.
Yeah.
And just also on the political side, I like the fact, this is not really a spoiler, it's a very minor spoiler, but the terrorists behind the destabilization strategy are Libyans, and they do make some points of we just did fuck up the whole country of Libya and then just leave them to collapse into a horrible violent civil war, which is actually still ongoing because it wasn't part of our geopolitical strategy. And I like that the show, that's definitely, I feel, a Will Smith moment of like, he's pointing out like, yep, we did a fucked up thing there and it's not over. And at no point does the show ever attempt to like apologise for British foreign policy towards Libya or like admit it was anything other than a fucking train wreck. Obviously the show comes down on the side of the people who want to shoot up a church because their country got destroyed are bad people, and you want them to be stopped. But underneath it, there's the kind of classic, like, the show never strays too far from basically saying, yeah, they kind of have a point that we fucked their country up really good and proper, and it is our fault.
Yeah, no, in the past, when this show has depicted like domestic extremists, it's been a lot less sympathetic towards them than it is towards the Libyans here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell, yeah. So again, like for a show that's mainly a spy thriller with some comedy moments and some interesting characters, again, it's Will Self's influence. There is a political message here that is like, it's beneath the surface, but it's not particularly deep beneath the surface.
Yeah, I think Will Smith is stepping back from this after this season, so we'll be interested to see if the tone changes at all subsequently.
I guess tune into future MFV to find out.
Yeah, but no, there's also... The one other bit I wanted to mention, there's an extremely good Slow Horses moment, which I feel I shouldn't spoil, but there's one of the cliffhangers, I think about episode 4 or something, is genuinely the most I've laughed at this show in a while. It's one of the most audaciously ridiculous things I've seen in ages, and I really enjoyed it. It's like that was a real, yeah, we went there moment. Really good. I'm not going to spoil it, but it was great.
No, I'm not going to spoil it either, but I thought it was great as well, and yeah, like I say, I laughed really hard. It goes to show that even though this is like, a serious spy show in which like, the terrorists are, are not funny and, it's making a serious point, the show does still again drop some just hilarious moments that are just like ridiculous and funny and things like that. So the tone is very well observed. So yeah, which is one of the things I really like about the show.
Yeah, and also it does keep in line with what the show does well, which is, because they're occasionally doing like cool espionage things and because the people they're fighting against are real assholes, you can sometimes trick yourself into thinking, oh, these people are actually cool, competent spies. So it's important, but every so often they do something incredibly stupid and massively fuck up the whole mission in a way that you really don't usually see professional spies doing on television. And it's always good when they really commit to that. It's really another one of the things this show does well. Yeah. The fact that these spies, in the case of River Cartwright, these handsome, good-looking spies who you'd really expect to be, competent just because they're handsome, are in fact punnishly bad at their job sometimes. Okay, and that was Moderate Fantasy Violence for this fortnight. Thanks as ever for listening. If you have enjoyed this audio experience, please go to our website where you can have many, many more of them, or it should also be available in your podcast application of choice, where you could maybe leave us a nice 5-star review. Thanks in advance. You can also get more of us on Blue Sky, where we are at MFV Podcast, and on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. And you can also get more from me. I'm Alastair Ball on Blue Sky, Instagram and TikTok. I also have more writing at redtrainblog.com and theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. And I've been Nick Bryan. You can get more from me on Blue Sky or Instagram mostly, where I am nickbryan.com. Often with a dot, but on Instagram with the word dot. And if you happen to be at the Thought Bubble Comic Convention in Harrogate, I will be selling my stuff there in the Bubble Boy Hall. I suspect the cross-section of people who listen to this podcast and go to that convention might be small to the point of non-existent, but you never know. And in the meantime, assuming you're not at Thought Bubble, we'll be back in 2 weeks, where we'll be covering Predator Badlands, the latest step in that franchise's long, slow journey to redemption, and then we'll be checking out the third storyline of World Tree, the cyberpunk comic we've been enjoying. So, until then, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye. Peace the fuck out. I'm sure it'll be alright. I'm willing to do stuff to make this work. Got that on a hot mic, great. It's only a podcast, Alastair, calm down. Right. Okay.